It was the summer of 2019, and Sarah was looking for a new place to live. She had just graduated from college and landed her first job in a city far from home. Excited yet anxious about the next chapter of her life, she browsed through countless online ads for apartments and rooms for rent. After a few weeks of searching, she stumbled upon a listing that seemed too good to be true. A spacious two-bedroom apartment in a nice neighborhood, reasonably priced, and with a roommate who was described as quiet and respectful. Sarah quickly reached out to the contact in the ad, a woman named Lisa, and they arranged a meeting. When Sarah arrived at the apartment, she was greeted by Lisa, a petite woman in her late 20s with short blonde hair and a warm smile. The apartment was indeed spacious and well-maintained, just as the ad had promised. After a brief tour and a friendly chat, Sarah felt confident that this was the place for her. She agreed to move in the following week. Moving day came, and Sarah's family helped her transport her belongings to the new apartment. Lisa was there to lend a hand and made Sarah feel welcome. The first few days were uneventful. Sarah and Lisa exchanged pleasantries, but mostly kept to themselves. Sarah was busy with her new job, and Lisa seemed to have her own routine, often staying in her room or going out in the evenings. Despite the initial smooth transition, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Lisa. She was friendly enough, but there was an underlying sense of secrecy in her behavior. Lisa rarely talked about herself or her life outside the apartment. Whenever Sarah asked about her job or hobbies, Lisa would give vague answers and quickly change the subject. One night, Sarah was in her room reading a book when she heard strange noises coming from Lisa's room. It sounded like muffled voices and shuffling feet. Curious, Sarah pressed her ear against the wall to listen more closely. The voices were indistinct, and she couldn't make out any words. After a few minutes, the noises stopped, and Sarah dismissed it as Lisa having a phone conversation. A few weeks later, Sarah experienced the first incident that made her question her decision to move in. It was a Friday night, and she had planned a quiet evening at home with a movie and some takeout. Lisa had mentioned earlier that she would be out late, so Sarah thought she would have the apartment to herself. Around midnight, Sarah was startled by a loud crash coming from Lisa's room. She rushed to the door and knocked, calling out Lisa's name. There was no response. After a few moments of silence, Sarah hesitantly opened the door. The room was dark, and she fumbled for the light switch. When the light flicked on, Sarah gasped. Lisa's room was in disarray. The nightstand was overturned, books and papers were scattered across the floor, and the window was wide open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. Sarah's heart raced as she called out for Lisa again, but there was still no answer. She quickly closed the window and stepped out into the hallway, her mind racing with possibilities. Had Lisa been attacked? Had she left in a hurry? Sarah decided to call the police, fearing the worst. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the apartment and questioned Sarah about Lisa's whereabouts and recent behavior. Sarah told them everything she knew, which wasn't much. The police took notes and assured Sarah they would do their best to find Lisa. They advised her to stay with a friend or family member for the night, but Sarah decided to stay in the apartment, hoping Lisa would return. The following morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of knocking on the front door. She hurried to answer it, hoping it was Lisa. Instead, she found a tall, stern-looking man standing there. He introduced himself as Detective Jameson and explained that he was investigating Lisa's disappearance. He asked if he could come in and ask a few questions. Sarah invited him in and recounted the events of the previous night. As they talked, Detective Jameson noticed the disarray in Lisa's room and asked if he could take a closer look. Sarah agreed, and they both went into the room. The detective examined the overturned furniture and scattered papers, then paused as he noticed something odd. In the corner of the room, partially hidden under the bed, was a small, leather-bound journal. Detective Jameson picked it up and flipped through the pages. His expression grew more serious as he read. He showed the journal to Sarah, pointing out entries that described strange occurrences and paranoid thoughts. Lisa had written about feeling watched, hearing voices, and seeing shadows moving in the apartment. Sarah was shocked. She had no idea Lisa had been experiencing such things. Detective Jameson asked if Lisa had ever mentioned anything about these incidents to her, but Sarah shook her head. She explained that Lisa had always been secretive and never talked about her personal life. The detective took the journal as evidence and assured Sarah that they would continue to investigate. He advised her to be cautious and report any further strange occurrences. Sarah thanked him and watched as he left, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over the apartment. She tried to go about her daily routine, but the strange incidents continued. She would hear whispers in the middle of the night, see fleeting shadows out of the corner of her eye, and find objects moved from their usual places. One evening, Sarah was in the living room when she noticed a faint, cold breeze. She looked around and saw that the window was closed, but the curtains were gently swaying. She approached the window and felt an inexplicable chill in the air. As she stood there, she heard a soft, almost inaudible whisper, "Help me." Terrified, Sarah backed away from the window and ran to her room. She locked the door and sat on her bed, her heart pounding. She considered calling the police again, but hesitated, not wanting to seem paranoid. Instead, she decided to stay with a friend for a few days, hoping that the strange occurrences would stop in her absence. When she returned to the apartment, things seemed normal at first. There were no whispers, no shadows, no cold breezes. Sarah began to relax, thinking that maybe her imagination had been playing tricks on her. However, that sense of normalcy was short-lived. One night, Sarah woke up to the sound of someone crying. She sat up in bed and listened, trying to determine where the sound was coming from. It seemed to be coming from Lisa's room. Gathering her courage, Sarah grabbed a flashlight and quietly made her way down the hall. The crying grew louder as she approached the door. With a trembling hand, Sarah slowly opened the door and shone the flashlight inside. The room was empty, but the crying continued. She stepped inside, following the sound to the closet. The door was slightly ajar, and as she opened it, the crying abruptly stopped. Inside the closet, she found a small, old-fashioned doll, its porcelain face cracked and its dress tattered. Sarah picked up the doll, examining it closely. She had never seen it before and wondered how it had ended up in Lisa's closet. As she held the doll, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and she heard a faint whisper, "Help me." The next day, Sarah took the doll to a local antique shop, hoping to learn more about its origins. The shop owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Parker, examined the doll and immediately recognized it. She explained that the doll had once belonged to a young girl named Emily, who had lived in the apartment building many years ago. Emily had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and the doll was believed to be cursed. Mrs. Parker told Sarah that the doll was rumored to be a vessel for Emily's spirit, trapped between the living and the dead. She advised Sarah to get rid of the doll immediately, as it could bring misfortune and attract malevolent spirits. Sarah thanked Mrs. Parker and left the shop, feeling a sense of dread. Back at the apartment, Sarah decided to follow Mrs. Parker's advice. She wrapped the doll in a cloth and took it to a nearby park, burying it under a tree. As she covered the doll with dirt, she whispered a prayer, hoping to free Emily's spirit. That night, Sarah slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The whispers, shadows, and cold breezes were gone. She felt a sense of peace, believing that Emily's spirit had finally found rest. However, the mystery of Lisa's disappearance still haunted her. A few days later, Detective Jameson contacted Sarah with an update on the case. He explained that they had found no evidence of foul play in Lisa's disappearance, but had discovered something unsettling. Lisa had been involved in researching paranormal activities and had visited several haunted locations in the months leading up to her disappearance. The detective theorized that Lisa's fascination with the paranormal might have led her to the cursed doll, and that she had become a victim of the same malevolent forces that had plagued Emily. He advised Sarah to be cautious and to seek help if she experienced any further strange occurrences. As the weeks went by, life slowly returned to normal for Sarah. She never saw or heard from Lisa again, and the apartment remained free of paranormal activity. However, the experience left her with a deep sense of unease and a newfound respect for the unknown. Sarah eventually moved out of the apartment and found a new place to live, hoping to leave the disturbing memories behind. She couldn't help but wonder what had really happened to Lisa and whether Emily's spirit had truly found peace. The experience had changed her, making her more aware of the mysteries and dangers that lurk just beyond the veil of the ordinary. As she settled into her new life, Sarah vowed to never take her safety for granted and to always trust her instincts. The haunting experience with Lisa and the cursed doll had taught her that sometimes the most disturbing horror stories are the ones that happen in real life. The roommate who never left. After her freshman year of college, Mia decided to move off campus. She found a charming 2-bedroom apartment just a short bus ride away from the university. The rent was affordable and the neighborhood was safe. There was only one catch: she needed a roommate. Mia posted an ad online and soon received a response from a girl named Lily, who seemed perfect. She was a junior studying psychology, quiet, and had a steady part-time job. They agreed to meet the next day. When Lily arrived, Mia was immediately struck by her warm smile and friendly demeanor. They chatted for a while, discussing their majors, interests, and living habits. Mia felt an instant connection and offered Lily the room. Lily moved in the following week, and for the first few months, everything was great. They got along well, respected each other's space, and even hung out together occasionally. However, things began to change gradually. Mia started noticing that Lily was becoming increasingly withdrawn. She spent most of her time in her room, and when she did come out, she seemed distant and distracted. Mia tried to reach out, but Lily brushed off her concerns, attributing her behavior to stress from school and work. One night, Mia was woken up by the sound of whispering. She glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. She lay still, trying to make out the words. It sounded like Lily was having an intense conversation with someone. Mia got up, intending to check on her, but as she approached Lily's door, the whispering abruptly stopped. She knocked softly and called out, but there was no response. The next morning, when Mia asked Lily about it, she simply shrugged and said she must have been talking in her sleep. A few weeks later, Mia came home from class to find the apartment eerily quiet. She called out for Lily, but received no reply. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed Lily's door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, Mia was shocked to find the room empty. There was no furniture, no personal belongings, nothing to indicate that anyone had been living there. It was as if Lily had vanished without a trace. Panic set in. Mia called Lily's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She reached out to Lily's friends and co-workers, but no one had seen or heard from her. Desperate, Mia contacted the police and filed a missing person report. The officers conducted a thorough search of the apartment and took statements from Mia and the neighbors. They assured her they would do everything they could to find Lily. In the days that followed, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The apartment, once a cozy haven, now felt cold and oppressive. She began experiencing strange phenomena, lights flickering, cold drafts, and objects moving on their own. One night, she woke up to find her bedroom door wide open, even though she was sure she had closed it before going to bed. Mia confided in her best friend Jenna, who suggested she consult a paranormal investigator. Though skeptical, Mia was willing to try anything to get to the bottom of the mystery. They contacted a local investigator named Ethan, who agreed to come to the apartment and conduct an investigation. Ethan arrived with his equipment and began his assessment. He used various devices to measure electromagnetic fields and temperature fluctuations. As he moved through the apartment, he asked Mia about her experiences and documented everything meticulously. When he reached Lily's room, the equipment began to react erratically. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the EMF detector spiked. Ethan set up a voice recorder in the room and encouraged Mia to ask questions aloud, hoping to capture any responses. Hesitantly, Mia began, "Lily, are you here? What happened to you?" They waited in silence, the tension thick in the air. After a few minutes, Ethan played back the recording. To their shock, they heard a faint, distorted voice responding, "Help me." Ethan explained that the voice could be a residual energy imprint left by Lily or someone else who had experienced trauma in the apartment. He recommended performing a cleansing ritual to try to release the spirit and bring peace to the space. Desperate for answers and relief, Mia agreed. They performed the ritual the following evening. Ethan burned sage, recited prayers, and asked the spirit to leave the apartment. Mia felt a sense of calm wash over her as they worked, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When the ritual was complete, Ethan advised Mia to stay vigilant, but hoped that the activity would cease. For a while, things seemed to improve. The strange occurrences stopped, and the apartment felt lighter. Mia was finally able to sleep through the night without fear. However, the peace was short-lived. One evening, Mia was sitting in the living room when she heard a faint knock at the door. She opened it, expecting a neighbor or delivery person, but found no one there. As she closed the door, she saw a piece of paper on the floor. It was a photograph of Lily, with the words, "I'm still here," scrawled across the back in red ink. Terrified, Mia called Ethan, who advised her to leave the apartment immediately. She packed a bag and went to stay with Jenna. The next day, Mia contacted the landlord and explained the situation. She asked to break her lease and move out as soon as possible. The landlord, understanding and sympathetic, agreed. As Mia packed up her belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She moved swiftly, not wanting to spend another night in the apartment. On her last trip to the car, she glanced back at the building and saw a figure standing in the window of what used to be Lily's room. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it sent chills down her spine. Mia moved in with Jenna temporarily while she looked for a new place. She couldn't stop thinking about Lily and what had happened to her. Determined to find answers, she continued to stay in touch with the police and Ethan. Despite their efforts, Lily was never found, and the mystery of her disappearance remained unsolved. Months passed, and Mia eventually found a new apartment. She tried to move on with her life, but the experience left a lasting impact. She became more cautious, wary of new roommates and strange occurrences. The memory of Lily and the haunted apartment lingered in her mind, a reminder that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. In the years that followed, Mia occasionally heard rumors about the apartment. Some tenants reported similar strange occurrences, while others moved out abruptly without explanation. The building gained a reputation for being haunted, and many people avoided it altogether. Mia never went back, but she couldn't help but wonder if Lily was still there, trapped between worlds, waiting for someone to uncover the truth. The experience taught Mia to trust her instincts and be vigilant about the people she allowed into her life. Though the mystery of Lily's disappearance was never solved, Mia found a sense of closure in knowing she had done everything she could to help. She hoped that wherever Lily was, she had found peace. The basement roommate. After graduating from college, Mark landed a job in a new city and needed a place to stay. He found a cozy basement apartment in an old but well-maintained building. The rent was affordable and the location was convenient. The landlord, Mr. Thompson, was an elderly man who seemed kind and welcoming. He informed Mark that he would have the basement to himself, but he would occasionally share the space with another tenant who lived upstairs, a young woman named Emily. Mark moved in and quickly settled into his new life. He rarely saw Emily, as she had an irregular schedule and seemed to keep to herself. Occasionally, they would exchange pleasantries in the hallway, but they never really had a conversation. Mark didn't mind, as he appreciated the privacy and quietness of the apartment. One evening, a few months after moving in, Mark heard faint footsteps and the sound of something dragging across the floor above him. It was late, and he assumed Emily was moving furniture or cleaning. He shrugged it off and went to bed. Over the next few nights, the noises continued, growing louder and more frequent. Mark started to feel uneasy, but tried to rationalize it as Emily going through a phase of late-night activities. One night, the sounds were particularly disturbing. Mark heard what sounded like whispers and faint crying. Concerned, he decided to check on Emily. He went upstairs and knocked on her door. There was no answer, but the noises stopped abruptly. Feeling awkward, Mark returned to his apartment and tried to sleep, but the unsettling sounds echoed in his mind. The next day, Mark saw Mr. Thompson and mentioned the noises. The landlord's face turned pale, and he nervously assured Mark that he would look into it. However, the noises continued, and Mark's unease grew. He began to notice other strange occurrences: cold drafts in the hallway, objects slightly moved from where he had left them, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Mark decided to talk to Emily directly. One evening, he waited by her door, hoping to catch her on her way out. Hours passed, and there was no sign of her. Just as he was about to give up, he heard the familiar footsteps and dragging sounds again. This time, they seemed to be coming from the basement itself. Mark followed the sounds to a small, locked door at the end of the hallway. He had assumed it was a storage room, but the noises coming from behind it suggested otherwise. Summoning his courage, he went to Mr. Thompson and asked for the key. The landlord looked uncomfortable and hesitated before finally handing over the key with a warning. "Be careful, Mark. Some things are better left alone." Ignoring the ominous advice, Mark unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. In the corner, he noticed a large, antique mirror. The frame was ornate and looked out of place among the other mundane items. As he approached the mirror, Mark's reflection seemed distorted, almost as if it were moving independently. He reached out to touch it, and a chill ran down his spine. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled, and Mark felt an intense pull, as if something were trying to drag him in. He yanked his hand back, heart pounding, and stumbled out of the room, locking the door behind him. Shaken by the experience, Mark confronted Mr. Thompson. The old man sighed heavily and finally revealed the truth. The building had a dark history. Decades ago, a young woman named Abigail had lived in the basement apartment. She was reclusive and reportedly practiced dark rituals. One day, she vanished without a trace. Soon after, tenants began reporting strange occurrences, particularly around the mirror, which was believed to be a portal to another realm. Mr. Thompson explained that Emily had moved out months ago, terrified by the same noises and disturbances Mark was experiencing. The landlord had hoped Mark would be less affected, but it was clear that whatever haunted the basement had not moved on. Determined to rid himself of the torment, Mark decided to research the building's history and the occult practices Abigail was said to have engaged in. He spent hours in the local library, poring over old newspapers and books on the supernatural. He discovered that Abigail had been obsessed with contacting the spirit world, and the mirror was a key element in her rituals. It was said that she had created a gateway to communicate with spirits, but something had gone wrong, trapping her between worlds. Mark knew he had to close the portal to end the haunting. He enlisted the help of a local paranormal expert, Dr. Carter, who specialized in cleansing rituals and spirit communication. Dr. Carter agreed to come to the apartment and perform the necessary rites. The night of the cleansing, Mark and Dr. Carter entered the basement room. The air was thick with tension, and the temperature seemed to drop as they approached the mirror. Dr. Carter began the ritual, chanting in a low, rhythmic tone and sprinkling salt around the room. Mark watched in nervous anticipation, feeling the atmosphere grow heavier with each passing moment. As the ritual reached its climax, the mirror began to shimmer and pulse. The room filled with a cold wind, and faint whispers echoed around them. Dr. Carter's chants grew louder, commanding the spirits to leave and the portal to close. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the room, and the mirror's surface shattered, sending shards of glass flying. When the chaos subsided, the room fell silent. The oppressive feeling lifted, and the temperature returned to normal. Dr. Carter assured Mark that the portal was closed and that Abigail's spirit was finally at rest. Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him, grateful that the nightmare was over. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased. The apartment felt lighter, and the sense of dread was gone. Mark continued to live there peacefully until his job took him to another city. Before leaving, he thanked Mr. Thompson for his support and encouraged him to share the building's history with future tenants, hoping to prevent anyone else from experiencing the same ordeal. Mark never forgot his time in the haunted basement apartment. The experience had left a lasting impression, teaching him to respect the unknown and the power of the supernatural. Though he moved on with his life, he often found himself thinking back to that eerie basement room and the dark secrets it had held,